class. Today I'm going to talk to you about the readings for this week, which were chapters 9, 10, 11, and 14. The first chapter I'm going to talk to you about was chapter 9, and chapter 9 was about organizing the body of your speech, and the way that you organize your speech affects the results that you get from your audience. If you use a clear method of organization, it helps you to be a more confident speaker, and so then you deliver a clearer message to your audience, which is the whole point. If you can't deliver a clear message, then your audience isn't going to get what you're saying. So one thing that I noticed in chapter 9 that I thought was good advice was that the main points in your speech, they should be independent from each other, but also have similar word patterns, and you should devote a similar amount of time to each of your main points of your speech. You don't want to give too much time to one area and too little to another. Otherwise, you might give your audience the impression that part of your speech, the topic, is more important than some of the others. The checklist that's on page 177 in the book is really helpful, I think, when you're trying to organize a speech. Chapter 10 was on beginning and ending your speech, on the introduction and the conclusion, which a lot of times make or break your speech. The introduction is what gets your audience's attention and gives them the topic of your speech and establishes your credibility. You want to make sure in your introduction that you relate the topic to your audience. And you can do that by questioning the audience or telling them a story. Those are two great ways to do it. The conclusion is where you let your audience know that you're ending your speech, and you use your conclusion to reinforce the central idea of your speech with your audience. You can do this by summarizing your speech, which is personally my favorite way to conclude a speech. It kind of gives the audience a reminder of what all you've talked about. Or you can also use a dramatic statement or refer to your introduction, which I think is another great way to conclude a speech. Chapter 11 was about outlining a speech. This is probably the area that I struggle the most. I do not like doing outlines. But with an outline, it's basically the framework of your speech. And there's a checklist on page 210 in the book that I think I found it very helpful. I think maybe you will as well for designing your outline. The last chapter for this week was chapter 14, and it was regarding visual aids, the kinds of visual aids, guidelines for preparing them, and guidelines for presenting them. Some of the kinds of visual aids that they mentioned in the book were photographs and drawings, graphs, charts, videos, and sometimes even a speaker's body, which I had never really thought about before as a visual aid, but it's totally understandable that it could be. You want to make sure that you prepare your visual aids in advance. You keep them simple so that your audience doesn't get confused. You want to make sure they're large enough for your audience to see, and you want to limit the text on the visual aids so that you don't confuse your audience. If you use a visual aid, you want to make sure that you explain it clearly, and you want to talk to your audience, not the visual aid. It's so easy to look at an inanimate object and talk to it. You feel less judged, so I can understand how people would do that. You also want to make sure that if you use visual aids, that you practice with them. You don't want to get up in front of an audience with the visual aid for the very first time. That could be a hot mess. Well, that's all I have for y'all this week, and I hope that you have a great weekend. Bye.